In the face of overwhelming danger, Luffy has never been the one to back down. Luffy's the captain that's going to fight forward to take down whoever is in front of him to achieve his goals. That's why Sabaody was so different for us. They faced overwhelming danger. Luffy knew that they could not win. He didn't try to overcome it with will. He knew it wasn't possible. That's why I think this is one of Luffy's best moments as a captain. It's kind of overshadowed by how great this arc was with all the other things that went on, but Luffy telling everyone to run away was the best decision at the time. They were facing the Marine's greatest power, the Navy Admiral, and the captain didn't even have a grasp of haki. They stood no chance. I think for Luffy, he should continuously thank Rayleigh because he saved the Straw Hats in more ways than one. Obviously, he stopped Kizaru from killing Zoro. However, he saved the Straw Hats immensely by not only recommending for them to go train, by being the one to train Luffy. Luffy's incredible growth is not something new. He's always risen to the occasion no matter what has been put before him, no matter the opponent. Crocodile overcame Luffy twice, but then he came back with a strategy and he managed to beat Crocodile. Rob Lucci made short work of Luffy and Zoro, however Luffy came back with Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd and was able to overcome Rob Lucci. Luffy's learning of Gear 2nd has always been a thing, and people always say that's an ass pull because Luffy just saw CP9 and that gave him the idea on how to use his Devil Fruit power. I don't view it so much as bullshit, especially when we saw it in a movie. Of course that's not canon, but it makes sense how Luffy kind of stumbled into Gear 2nd. And again, having that power for so long, I'm sure sometimes you stumble into things that you didn't think was possible initially. So for him seeing CP9 and copying CP9, I have no problem with that, even Gear 3rd. Luffy's growth has always been necessary. He's run into overpowered antagonists like Enel before, but of course with him being the Rubber Man, Enel's electricity could not affect him. And these are the ways Oda has cleverly let Luffy power up without it being an ass pull, or it seeming contrived, or Luffy's just getting stronger to get stronger. Versus Magellan, Luffy lost several times. Luffy had to have his life saved, but these are the losses that helped him grow. Another person Luffy should thank is Kuma. Because initially upon Kuma doing what he did to Luffy, he saw for the first time how it felt to be completely powerless. He felt the meaning of your friends dying in front of you without the actual event happening. When Kuma did those things to the Straw Hats, Luffy had no idea what was going on. All he saw was his friends disappearing right in front of him. The pain of loss can motivate you like no other. And that's what it did to Luffy. After learning of Ace's capture, Luffy was hell-bent on rescuing his brother, even breaking into Impel Down, like I said, losing to Magellan, gaining somewhat immune-like abilities to certain types of poison, which actually helped in the end, and participating in the War of the Best. These things in succession showed Luffy that he indeed was not ready. I'm sure Rayleigh knew how strong Luffy was upon meeting him, but if he came to him at that point and told him, hey, at this point you probably should go and train to get stronger before going to the New World, Luffy would probably decline and say it's all about adventure, I want to explore things. However, losing to Kizaru, Sentomaru, and Kuma, losing to Magellan and Impel Down, and losing to pretty much everyone at Marineford, but more importantly losing his brother in the War of the Best, these things showed him time and time again that getting stronger was necessary. He's always gotten stronger as a byproduct. Gear 2nd, he saw them do it and said, hey, I should try this. He's always been very improvisational, and he's always found a way. In these three separate instances, even though there was a level of success as a byproduct, Luffy lost, utter defeat in each arc. But of course, with his true power, it doesn't seem that way because he gained extremely helpful allies that's gotten him to where he is now. From Rayleigh to Ivankov, to Jinbei, Luffy's growth is important to the One Piece story. That's obvious. And Dressrosa, with the reveal of Gear 4th, gave us that overwhelming power that we always wanted to see from Luffy. But there was a clever drawback. Luffy could only do this for but so long, then after he had a period in which he couldn't use haki at all. It was a perfect power-up for Luffy in which he was trying to achieve things somewhat quickly because it's a shonen, and the drawback was significant. It had to be. Gear 4th is an overwhelming form. It literally takes Luffy from probably not even commander level to right-hand status. But with this huge jump in power, a huge drawback is necessary. There is, however, a huge issue with Luffy's growth and some of the things that's happened throughout the story. Upon introduction to mantra at Sky Island, Luffy saw how Enel was proficient in using this technique. It would have been great if Luffy had inquired or learned mantra, some semblance of mantra, at some point after Sky Island. But Oda and how he writes his story, the characters are true to their characterization. They very rarely veer away from what we know them to do. That's why for a lot of people, they feel like the characters in One Piece have no character development development, but that is intentional. The story is character driven. Characterization is what brings you in. That's why most people have several different favorite characters, but they do specific things. They accomplish specific goals. It may seem like Luffy is growing at an alarming rate. He's been sailing, not including the time skip, for less than a year, and he's gone from relative unknown pirate in East Blue to a Yonko. However, this is not due to Luffy just being overly powerful. This is due to his special power, which is drawing people close to him. Luffy has benefited immensely from the people around him. That's not a fault of the character that people around him want to help him. How do you view Nami's help versus Cracker? Do you feel like Luffy has to overcome something like this on his own? What about versus Doflamingo? Do you feel like Law's involvement took away from Luffy's victory? I'm sure it did, but the point was to show that Luffy, no matter the situation, is going to find a way to overcome it, even if he's weaker. Now let's jump to Wano and Luffy's progression in this arc. Upon coming into this arc after his duel with Katakuri, a lot of people felt like Luffy was somewhat overpowered, especially if he learned Future Sight. In Udon, he's indeed shown some semblance of mastering this power, and with his overwhelming strength in Gear 4th and the speed of Snake Man, Luffy's insane endurance, Luffy is unbeatable. He probably still can't beat Admirals and Yonko, but he is amazing. Again, this is upon entering Wano. We then see Luffy versus Kaido, and that was a rude awakening for Luffy. Most of the fans felt like Luffy wasn't ready, but this was really letting the fans know Luffy really isn't ready. We knew Luffy had to get stronger, and he had to get stronger quickly because Kaido has to go down. He made a promise to Otama and the people of Wano already, that he was going to liberate this country. Not only to Otama, but he made a promise to Momonosuke. He promised to help him take down Kaido. So Kaido has to go down, but Luffy seems nowhere near this Yonko. The Yonko are overwhelming forces, and Big Mom proved that in this recent chapter. She made short work of a Yonko commander without using haki or devil fruit. It's a weird thing I've been thinking about, but for Big Mom and her outer body, her coat that protects her, we assume it's some form of haki. So for all of her hits, wouldn't invisible haki be involved as well? A topic for another day, but Big Mom seemingly did this without haki or devil fruit. Back to Luffy versus Kaido. Luffy got one shot by Kaido. Of course, Kaido used the technique and used his weapon, but Luffy, after going several hours with Katakuri, was decimated. Now, matchups are important because Katakuri is not the overwhelming physical force that Kaido is. He's somewhat of a very technical fighter. No, he's definitely a very technical fighter. To master your devil fruit with your observation haki that way, extremely technical, and he focuses on not getting hit and breaking you down as opposed to overwhelming strength that is Kaido. Luffy in most ways is a brawler just like Kaido. So pretty much he ran up against himself, but better. So how does Luffy overwhelm Kaido? A new gear? Mastering Gear 4th? Awakening? I've always figured that Luffy would have to work on his base, and this arc is focusing on that. Wano has been good, but so far for Luffy, it's been a glorified training arc. From working in Udon with sea stone cuffs on, but the sea stone cuffs are modified so you can still work very hard, Luffy has also gotten noticeably bigger to show that he is indeed getting physically stronger in his base form. And Udon is no different, in which Luffy is benefiting from the people around him. Like his former sensei Rayleigh before him, he has a new one in Hyogoro. And in some way, it does feel contrived. He ran into Rayleigh, the right hand of the Pirate King, and then he was trained by the right hand of the Pirate King. But for Luffy to become the Pirate King that we expect him to be, he has to eclipse several monsters. Blackbeard is sporting 2 devil fruits, maybe 3, we don't know. And we saw what Blackbeard was able to do to the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates pretty easily. Luffy has to eclipse that, or at least match that with his somewhat regular devil fruit and haki. To overcome Kaido, Luffy's not only going to need to get stronger, but also he's going to need help. But mainly let's focus on how Luffy can get stronger and how it's important. Luffy was not able to do anything to Kaido. He landed several blows and they did no noticeable damage. In the haki we saw from Rayleigh and Sentomaru and even the Admirals and the Boa sisters, it seems like that's the way Luffy is going to penetrate Kaido's tough scales. Luffy finds Hyogoro, and of course Luffy being who he is, gains a friend that wants to help him. Hyogoro is a relic of the past, but a very strong person in the past, but he still has knowledge of techniques, and so he's training Luffy on how to use this new form of advanced haki. Now this advanced haki is weird, and I've been meaning to talk about this, but it has so many different layers and parts to it, you're not really sure exactly how it's gonna work. On one end, Hyogoro mentions what Zoro's sensei taught him, as far as the breadth of all things, being able to cut what you want to cut. He then mentions being able to transmit haki to something else. We saw what Rayleigh was able to do against the animals on Ruskaina, and we got an idea of what the technique is. However, how does the breadth of all things tie in? And again, how Luffy took off the collar, how is that advanced haki? Seems like he just used haki and ripped it off. What's so advanced about that? We still need a lot of explanation on how it's going to work and how he's going to overcome Kaido with this. And I had mentioned with advanced haki before something like Rokogen. And of course, Rokogen is the 7th Rokushiki technique after learning the first 6, and it's a shockwave shockwave through your chest. It seems like that's something Luffy should use or should be able to use, but a haki form of that. The connection between Rokushiki and haki, that's again another video, but there's something there. I believe it's a consensus that Rayleigh is probably the best haki user we've seen so far actually in combat, and Rayleigh was able to rip Kami's collar off like it was nothing. When you think about it, it goes back to the breadth of all things, being able to cut what you want to cut, being able to rip off whatever you want to rip off. But when Luffy did it, Hyogoro noticed it, and he found a way in which Luffy can improve upon that by putting him in another situation in which he has to use it, versus Big Mom. This has given us an indication that for Luffy to overcome a Yonko, you have to have that level of advanced haki. I have some issues with this, not because of Luffy, but basically why is it taking so long for us to see this form of advanced haki? And why is it only certain characters? We've seen a handful of characters use this certain form, but if it's this important, why haven't we seen this from more top tiers? Regardless, Luffy at this point is in front of an enraged Big Mom and is going to try to use this level of haki again. Things are falling into place for Luffy to get stronger, and yes, it may seem a bit contrived in which Luffy happened upon Hyogoro, who was one of the only people who could teach Luffy this technique, but this has to happen. It's better for Luffy to test it out now versus a Yonko and Big Mom than for it to be versus Kaido. Of course, he's not going to master it now versus Big Mom, but Luffy taking down Kaido, for it to make sense or for it to be somewhat believable, he has to have somewhat a grasp of this advanced haki. Luffy not only has to fight another strong opponent and win before fighting Kaido, Luffy has to show more mastery of Future Sight than we saw in Wano, and then some more mastery of this advanced haki. The other thing that we also have to keep in mind, by mastering being able to cut or hit or break whatever you want to break, Luffy would also apply this to his Devil Fruit techniques, mainly his control of Gear 4th and the amount of haki he uses. I've always said this, but Gear 4th is a very incomplete technique. Luffy is going to have to master that, but once he does, the power behind it is going to be insane. With an incomplete Gear 4th, Luffy is that powerful, but if he manages to harness the appropriate amount of haki in this form, the sky is honestly the limit. I think it's also apt for me to point out that when Luffy took the collar off, it's somewhat bent. Does this mean that Luffy is forcing his Devil Fruit ability onto objects by making it easily breakable? It seemed like it bent, and you could say it bent like rubber. Is this the next step to awakening? We've seen awakening with convenient Paramecias and Logias. Crocodile, he could touch the floor, it turns to sand. With Doflamingo, he creates more string. But for someone like Luffy, and for Luffy always being rubber, he doesn't conjure. He's somewhat of an enhancer. And of course, I'm using Hunter x Hunter techniques. He's somewhat of an enhancer. He enhances what he already has. He doesn't transform. He is an enhancer. With Katakuri, of course, he can transform, conjure, do all these things with his power. But for Luffy, how would his awakening work? For his awakening, can he force his Devil Fruit power onto others? For something that's immovable like Kaido, can you make a soft dent, a rubbery area on Kaido to impact him, to actually hurt him? Only time will tell, but Luffy's power-ups and his growth, it has to happen. Luffy's around Commander level right now. People say between the second Commander and right-hand man level, but Luffy has to go past that to stand a chance with Kaido. He's going to have the help of the other supernovas, but he has to absolutely become stronger. But guys, let me know how you think. How can Luffy become stronger to take down Kaido? And how do you feel about Luffy and how he's gotten stronger so far in the story? And if you want to be specific, Wano, do you have a problem with Luffy's growth? Or should Luffy be stronger than he is now? A lot of people mentioned that the story's been going on 20 years, but again, I don't feel like we should use the time of a running show as a justification or reason why someone in the show should be stronger. Luffy has not been on the seas 20 years, excluding the time skip, almost a year. So leave your thoughts below, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Become a patron below if you'd like to vote on video ideas. To all my current patrons, thank you so much. I appreciate all the support. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.